Ronald Orcutt was 32 years old, and he taught high school history for $48,000 a year in a city where that barely covered rent. 3 weeks ago, at what was supposed to be a peaceful family dinner, his mother-in-law said something in Arabic that she thought no one would understand. What she didn't know was that Ronald's mother understood every single word, and what happened next would tear apart his marriage, expose years of calculated cruelty, and teach him that sometimes the quietest people hold the most devastating truths. It was a Saturday evening in late November 2024, and the autumn air in downtown Chicago carried that crisp bite that makes you want to stay indoors. Ronald and his wife Monica were attending their monthly family dinner at his mother-in-law Layla Hassan's penthouse apartment in the Gold Coast district. Layla had insisted on hosting, as she always did, because her place was more appropriate for entertaining, which was her polite way of saying Ronald and Monica's modest two-bedroom apartment in Pilsen wasn't good enough. The apartment was exactly what you'd expect from a woman who'd built a successful import-export business over 3 decades. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan, marble countertops gleamed under designer lighting, and furniture that probably cost more than Ronald's Honda Civic filled every room. Everything was cream and gold and perfectly arranged, like a magazine spread that no one was supposed to actually live in. Ronald's mother, Patricia Orcutt, sat quietly on the leather sofa in her department store dress, the one she'd pressed carefully that morning, looking small and out of place among all that calculated luxury. If you enjoy stories of cultural revenge, hidden truths, and families torn apart by cruelty, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new stories here every day, each one more intense than the last one you watched, and tell me where you're watching from. Patricia had raised Ronald alone after his father died when he was 7. She'd worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and serving lunch at a school cafeteria during the day, to make sure her son could go to college. She never complained, never asked for help, and never learned to hide the tiredness in her eyes. At 63, she still worked part-time at the cafeteria because her Social Security check of $900 a month wasn't enough, and because she said staying busy kept her young. Ronald knew it was really because she was too proud to ask him for money when he was already struggling. Layla Hassan couldn't have been more different. She was 58 but looked 45, thanks to what Monica whispered were regular trips to a dermatologist in River North. She wore her wealth like armor, designer clothes with subtle logos, expensive jewelry that caught the light just right, perfectly styled hair that never moved out of place. She'd emigrated from Lebanon in her 20s, married a successful businessman who died 10 years ago, and built her own import-export empire. Ronald respected the work ethic. He didn't respect much else about her. From the moment Ronald had started dating Monica 4 years ago, Layla had made her disapproval clear. It was never direct. She was too sophisticated for that. Instead, it came in small cuts that added up to 1,000 wounds. Comments about how teaching is such noble work, even if it doesn't pay well. Questions about when Ronald might consider a real career in business. Suggestions that Monica could do better, delivered with a smile that never reached her eyes. Monica, to her credit, had always defended him. At least that's what Ronald had thought. His wife was 30 years old, worked as a marketing manager at a pharmaceutical company, and pulled in $85,000 a year. She'd grown up in Layla's world of country clubs and private schools, but she'd seemed different when they met, more grounded, more real. She told him she loved that he was passionate about teaching, that he cared about making a difference instead of just making money. But over the past year, Ronald had noticed changes. Small things at first. Monica started making comments about their apartment being too small for starting a family. She suggested he could make more money tutoring wealthy kids in Lincoln Park instead of spending his evenings grading papers. She'd started spending more time with her mother, coming home from their lunch dates with new designer bags, and a strange look in her eyes that Ronald couldn't quite read. That November evening, the dinner table was set with china that probably cost more than Ronald's monthly salary. Layla had prepared an elaborate spread, lamb, rice, salads, mezzi platters that covered every inch of the massive dining table. Monica's brother David was there too, a 35-year-old investment banker who worked 70-hour weeks and drove a BMW that he mentioned at least 3 times during every family gathering. Patricia had brought a simple dessert, an apple pie she'd baked that morning in her small kitchen in Bridgeport. She'd placed it quietly on the counter, almost apologetically, next to Layla's elaborate Lebanese pastries from a bakery in Dearborn that charged $30 a box. How thoughtful, Layla had said, barely glancing at the pie. Store-bought crust? No, I made it from scratch, Patricia replied softly. Oh, Layla's smile was sharp. How traditional. Ronald felt his jaw tighten, but Patricia just smiled and said nothing. That was her way, never causing trouble, never standing up for herself, always making herself smaller to keep the peace. It was something Ronald both loved and hated about his mother. He wanted her to fight back, to tell Layla exactly where she could shove her designer attitude. But Patricia had spent a lifetime learning that quiet dignity was sometimes the only weapon you had, when you couldn't afford any others. The dinner started pleasantly enough. David talked about a merger his firm was handling, numbers in the millions thrown around casually, like they were discussing the weather. Monica laughed at her brother's jokes and refilled wine glasses. Layla presided over it all like a queen, making sure everyone knew this was her kingdom and they were just guests in it. Ronald tried to engage, tried to be part of the conversation, but he felt like he was watching a play he wasn't quite part of. His mother was even quieter than usual, speaking only when directly addressed, her eyes distant in a way that made Ronald wonder what she was thinking. About halfway through the meal, Layla's sister Amira arrived. She was 60, elegantly dressed, and spoke with the same polished accent as Layla. The two women greeted each other warmly, kissing cheeks and immediately launching into rapid Arabic that filled the dining room with sounds Ronald didn't understand. He'd picked up a few words over the years, basic greetings, food terms, the occasional phrase Monica would teach him, but full conversations were beyond him. Monica translated sometimes when her mother said something she wanted him to hear, but mostly he just smiled and nodded when they looked his way. Amira took a seat near Layla, and the two women continued chatting in Arabic while they ate. Ronald noticed his mother had gone even quieter, her fork moving mechanically from plate to mouth, her eyes fixed on her food. That's when things changed. Layla was pouring tea, the elaborate silver pot glinting in the chandelier light, when she glanced toward Patricia and said something in Arabic to Amira. Her tone was light, almost musical, the way people sound when they're sharing a joke. Amira laughed, a bright tinkling sound, and responded with her own comment in Arabic. Both women glanced at Patricia, who was carefully cutting her lamb into smaller and smaller pieces. Monica smiled too, though her expression seemed uncomfortable. David was on his phone, not paying attention. Ronald felt a prickle of unease, but couldn't pinpoint why. His mother's hands had stopped moving, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. Then Layla said something else in Arabic, longer this time, more animated. Amira nodded along, adding her own observations. They were looking at Patricia's dress, Ronald realized, at her plain handbag on the floor by her chair, at the sensible shoes she'd worn because her feet hurt after long shifts at the cafeteria. Patricia set down her fork very carefully. She took a sip of water. Her hands were steady, but Ronald knew his mother well enough to see the slight tremor in her fingers, the way her jaw had tightened just barely, the way her eyes had gone dark and distant. "Is everything okay, Mom?" Ronald asked. "Fine, sweetheart," Patricia said softly. Her voice was normal, but something in her face wasn't. Layla continued in Arabic, and this time she used a word Ronald did recognize, fakira, poor. He'd heard Monica use it before when describing neighborhoods or people who'd fallen on hard times. Layla said it with a certain emphasis, drawing out the syllables, and Amira laughed again. Patricia stood up abruptly. The movement was so sudden that everyone stopped talking. "I'm not feeling well," Patricia said quietly. "Ronald, would you mind taking me home?" "Of course." Ronald was already pushing back his chair. "What's wrong? Do you need—" "I just need to go home." Patricia's voice was firm in a way Ronald had rarely heard. She smiled at Layla, a strange, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you for dinner. It was lovely." "Are you sure you're all right?" Monica asked, concern in her voice. "You barely ate." "I'm fine. Just tired." Patricia was already gathering her handbag, moving toward the door with a deliberateness that told Ronald not to argue. Layla said something in Arabic, probably a polite goodbye, but Patricia didn't respond. She just walked to the door and Ronald followed, confusion and anger mixing in his chest in ways he didn't fully understand yet. In the car on the way back to Patricia's apartment in Bridgeport, Ronald tried to get answers. "Mom, what happened back there?" "Nothing happened." "You're lying. You never leave early." "What did Layla say?" Patricia stared out the window at the passing streetlights. "It doesn't matter." "It matters to me. Did she insult you? Because I swear to God." "Ronald," his mother's voice was sharp, "leave it alone." But Ronald couldn't leave it alone. The look on his mother's face was something he'd never seen before. Not hurt exactly, but something harder, colder, like ice forming over deep water. They had no idea what was coming. He dropped Patricia off at her building, a modest 3-story walk-up where she lived for 20 years, and watched her climb the steps slowly, like she'd aged 10 years in one evening. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. Ronald drove back to his own apartment in Pilsen, his mind racing. Monica had texted him twice, once asking if Patricia was okay, once saying she'd stay at her mother's place tonight to help clean up. That was fine. Ronald needed time to think anyway. He poured himself a whiskey, the cheap kind he could afford, and sat on their second-hand couch, staring at nothing. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "I'm fine, don't worry, get some sleep." But Ronald couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the dinner in his mind, the way Layla and Amira had laughed, the way they'd looked at his mother, the word Fakira dripping with contempt, the way Patricia had just shut down. Around midnight, Ronald did something he'd never done before. He called his mother's oldest friend, Helen Chang, a woman who'd known Patricia since they'd both worked at the same office building 3 decades ago. "Helen, it's Ronald. Sorry to call so late." "Is Patricia okay?" Helen sounded instantly alert. "I don't know. Something happened at dinner tonight." Ronald explained the situation, the Arabic conversation, his mother's reaction. There was a long pause. Then Helen said something that made Ronald's blood run cold. "Your mother speaks Arabic, Ronald." "What?" "She's fluent. She worked for a Lebanese import company for 15 years before you were born. She was their translator and office manager. How do you not know this?" Ronald felt the floor drop out from under him. She never mentioned." "She probably had her reasons." Helen's voice was gentle. "If Layla was speaking Arabic in front of her, assuming she didn't understand, then Mom heard every word." Ronald's hands were shaking. "Oh my God, Mom heard everything." "You need to talk to her, Ronald. Really talk to her." Ronald hung up and immediately tried calling his mother. No answer. He texted, "Mom, Helen told me. Please call me." 5 minutes later, his phone rang. "You spoke to Helen." Patricia's voice was tired. "Why didn't you tell me you speak Arabic?" "Because it was a long time ago, and it didn't matter anymore. I stopped speaking it after your father died. There was no point." "Mom, what did Layla say tonight?" Another long pause. Then in a voice so quiet Ronald almost couldn't hear it, his mother told him. "She said I looked like a maid who'd wandered into the wrong apartment. She told Amira that she couldn't understand why Monica had married a man whose mother dressed like she shopped at thrift stores and smelled like cafeteria food. She said I was an embarrassment, that I should have stayed home, that every time she looked at me she worried Monica's children would inherit my poverty and lack of class." Patricia's voice was steady, clinical, like she was reciting facts. "She said I was exactly the kind of woman she'd spent her whole life trying to escape from. Poor, uneducated, and pathetic." And then she laughed. Ronald felt rage bloom in his chest like fire. "That fucking... Ronald, I'm going to call Monica right now. I'm going to... No." Patricia's voice was suddenly strong, forceful. "You're not going to do anything. Not yet." "What do you mean, not yet?" His mother was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, there was something different in her voice. Something Ronald had never heard before. Something that sounded almost like satisfaction. "Because my son, Layla Hassan, has no idea what she's just started. And I think it's time she learned that the woman she called pathetic and uneducated knows more about her precious business than she could ever imagine? Mom, what are you talking about? Do you know where I worked for 15 years, Ronald? The Lebanese import company? Yeah, you said it was called Hassan International Imports. I worked for Layla's late husband before she ever met him. I helped him build that company from the ground up. I know every supplier, every contact, every business practice they used, and I know things about how that company operates that Layla Hassan really wouldn't want anyone else to know. Ronald's heart was pounding. What are you saying? I'm saying that for 4 years, I've smiled and stayed quiet while that woman treated you like garbage. I've let her insult your education, your salary, your choices, because I thought Monica loved you, and that was all that mattered. But tonight she went too far. Tonight she made this personal. Mom, I need you to do something for me, Ronald. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Of course, but good. Then don't say anything to Monica yet. Don't confront Layla. Go to work on Monday like nothing happened. And when you get home Monday evening, come to my apartment. I'm going to show you exactly who Layla Hassan really is. And then we're going to decide together what to do about it. Ronald sat in his dark apartment, his phone pressed to his ear, and realized that his quiet, gentle mother, the woman who'd spent her life making herself smaller and avoiding conflict, was about to teach Layla Hassan a lesson she'd never forget. Okay, Mom, I trust you. Good boy. Now get some sleep. You're going to need it. The line went dead. Ronald sat in silence, his mind spinning, rage and confusion, and something else. Something that felt almost like anticipation, mixing in his chest. What happened next shocked everyone, starting with him. The weekend passed in a strange, tense fog. Monica came home Sunday afternoon, chattering about how much fun she'd had catching up with her mother and Aunt Amira, seemingly oblivious to the bomb that had detonated at Friday's dinner. Ronald kept his mouth shut, nodding in the right places, his mind racing with questions he couldn't yet ask. Your mom seemed really off on Friday, Monica said while unpacking her overnight bag. Is she feeling better? She's fine, Ronald replied, his voice neutral. Just tired from work. Monica frowned slightly. Maybe she should think about retiring. I mean, at her age, working at a cafeteria can't be easy. Something hot flashed through Ronald's chest. She likes working. It keeps her active. I know. Monica waved her hand dismissively. I just think, well, my mom was saying that maybe we could help her out financially, you know? Get her into a nicer place, help with expenses. She doesn't have to struggle like that. The irony wasn't lost on Ronald. Layla, who'd spent Friday night mocking his mother's poverty in Arabic, was now pretending to be concerned about Patricia's welfare. Ronald bit his tongue hard enough to taste blood. That's generous, he managed. I'll talk to Mom about it. But he wouldn't, because Monday evening, everything was going to change. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel if you have not, because the ending of this story will blow your mind. And drop a comment below telling me what you think Ronald should do next. Monday dragged like every minute was an hour. Ronald taught his classes on autopilot, his mind elsewhere. His students were discussing the civil rights movement, and he heard himself talking about Rosa Parks and peaceful resistance. But all he could think about was his mother's voice on the phone. Steady, cold, determined. His mother had always been the picture of gentle compliance, avoiding confrontation at all costs. This new version of Patricia Orcutt was a stranger. At 3:30, the final bell rang. Ronald grabbed his messenger bag and drove straight to Bridgeport, his hands tight on the steering wheel. The November sky was already darkening, clouds heavy with the promise of snow. Patricia's apartment was on the second floor, a modest one-bedroom with creaky hardwood floors and radiators that clanged when the heat kicked on. Ronald had grown up in this building, and every inch of it held memories. Learning to ride his bike in the alley out back, doing homework at the kitchen table while his mother made dinner between shifts, the sound of her crying quietly in her bedroom after his father's funeral. He knocked, and Patricia opened the door immediately, like she'd been waiting by it. She looked different somehow, her spine straighter, her eyes sharper. She'd changed out of her work uniform into slacks and a sweater, and her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Come in, she said. I made coffee. The small living room was transformed. Patricia had pulled out her old filing cabinet, a battered metal thing Ronald remembered from childhood, and spread documents across every available surface. The coffee table, the dining table, even the couch cushions were covered with papers, folders, and old photographs. "Mom, what is all this?" Patricia handed him a mug of coffee and gestured to the organized chaos. "This is 25 years of carefully kept records. This is my insurance policy. And this is how we're going to make Layla Hassan understand that she picked the wrong woman to humiliate." Ronald sank into a chair, his eyes scanning the papers. He saw letterheads for Hassan International Imports, shipping manifests, financial records, email printouts, and what looked like contracts. "Start at the beginning," he said. Patricia sat across from him, her hands wrapped around her own coffee mug. "I was 28 when I started working for Hassan International. Your father had just gotten sick, and I needed a job that paid better than retail. Ahmad Hassan, Layla's future husband, had just started the company and needed someone bilingual who understood international trade. I spoke Arabic from college courses and a semester abroad in Jordan. I was perfect for the job. You never told me about any of this. You were a child, Ronald, and after your father died and I had to leave the company, I wanted to focus on you, not the past." Patricia's voice was matter-of-fact. "But I was good at that job, very good. Ahmad trusted me with everything. Negotiations with suppliers in Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, contract reviews, quality control, financial reconciliation. For 15 years, I essentially ran the operations side of that business, while Ahmad focused on expansion and client relations." Ronald was trying to process this. His mother, his quiet, humble mother, who'd spent his entire life working service jobs, had once been a high-level business operations manager. "What happened?" "Your father died, and I fell apart." Patricia's voice softened slightly. "I couldn't focus, couldn't work those long hours anymore. I had a 7-year-old son who needed me. Ahmad was kind about it. He offered me reduced hours, work-from-home options, but I knew I couldn't do the job justice anymore. So I resigned. He gave me a generous severance, $50,000, which I used to keep us afloat for the next few years." "Did you know Layla then?" "No. Ahmad met her about 3 years after I left. She was working as a marketing consultant, helping him rebrand the company. They got married, she came on as a partner, and from what I heard through the grapevine, she slowly took over more and more of the business operations." Patricia's expression darkened. "When Ahmad died 10 years ago, Layla inherited everything. The company, the assets, the contacts I'd spent 15 years cultivating." Ronald was starting to understand. "You've been watching her." "Not actively, but I stayed friends with a few people who still work there. I get updates, and Ronald—" Patricia leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Layla Hassan has been cutting corners for years, the kind of corners that would get Hassan International in serious trouble if the right people found out." She pulled a thick folder toward her. "Import documentation fraud. She's been mislabeling products to avoid tariffs, claiming items manufactured in China are from Lebanon to benefit from trade agreements. That alone could result in fines of over $2 million and potential federal charges." Ronald's eyes widened. "How do you know this?" "Because I still have contacts with their shipping broker, and he's been sending me documentation for years. Not because he's trying to help me, he doesn't even know who I am anymore, but because the company uses a shared cloud system that I helped set up back in 2008, and nobody ever thought to revoke my admin access." Patricia smiled grimly. "I've been getting automatic backups of their shipping manifest for over a decade. Mom, that's probably illegal. Technical oversight, not illegal access. I never hacked anything. They simply forgot I was in the system." Patricia pulled out more documents. "But that's not all. Layla's been inflating her company's value by reporting false revenue numbers to investors. She's trying to sell Hassan International. There's a buyer interested, a corporate group that's offering $15 million. But she's been showing them books that claim annual revenues of $8 million when the real number is closer to $4 million. That's fraud. That's multiple counts of fraud." Patricia's voice was cold. "And then there's the personal tax issue. Layla owns a vacation property in Scottsdale, Arizona, a condo she bought for $600,000. She's been renting it out for short-term vacations, making probably $70,000 a year in rental income and not reporting a single dollar to the IRS. Ronald felt like he'd entered an alternate universe. How do you know about the rental property? Because she listed it on a vacation rental website under Hassan International's business name to make it look like a corporate property. But corporate properties require different tax treatment, and she's not doing it. I found the listing, cross-referenced it with public property records in Arizona, and confirmed it's personally owned by her. Patricia tapped a stack of printouts. I've got screenshots of every booking, every review, every payment notification that shows up in the company email system I still have access to. Ronald ran his hands through his hair. This was insane. This was absolutely insane. Mom, what are you planning to do with all this? Patricia stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening street. That depends on you, Ronald, because this isn't just about me. This is about the woman your wife is. This is about whether Monica knew her mother was mocking me in Arabic, whether she's been laughing at you behind your back, whether your marriage is built on something real or if you've been a project for them, a charity case that Layla allowed her daughter to marry because she thought she could control it. The words hit Ronald like a physical blow. You think Monica was in on it. I think Monica smiled when her mother spoke Arabic on Friday night. I think she didn't translate. I think she's been spending a lot more time with Layla lately, coming home with expensive things you can't afford, talking about bigger apartments and better careers. Patricia turned to face him. I think you need to find out the truth before we do anything else. Ronald felt sick. How? Ask her directly, tonight. Tell her you know I speak Arabic. Tell her you know what her mother said. Watch her reaction. Patricia's voice was gentle now, sad. If she knew, Ronald, if she understood what Layla was saying and said nothing, then she chose her mother's cruelty over defending you and me. And you need to know that. Ronald drove home in a daze, his mother's words echoing in his head. It was almost 7 when he pulled into his parking space. Monica's car was already there. She'd gotten home early. The lights were on in their apartment, warm and inviting through the November darkness. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. He could hear music playing inside, something cheerful and bright. Monica was humming along. Ronald unlocked the door. Monica was in the kitchen cooking pasta, still in her work clothes but with an apron tied over her blouse. She turned and smiled when she saw him. Hey, perfect timing. Dinner's almost ready. We need to talk. Something in his voice made her smile fade. Okay, what's wrong? Ronald set his bag down. Did you know my mother speaks Arabic? Monica froze, her wooden spoon suspended over the pot. For just a second, less than a second, her face showed something Ronald had never seen there before. Panic. Then it was gone, replaced by confusion. What? No, your mom doesn't speak Arabic. She's fluent. She worked for Hassan International for 15 years as a translator and operations manager. She understood every single word your mother said on Friday night. The spoon clattered into the pot. Monica's face had gone pale. Ronald, Did you know what your mother was saying? Some of it was too fast. I couldn't. Monica, his voice was hard. Did you know your mother was calling my mother pathetic and poor? Did you know she was mocking her clothes, her job, her entire life? Monica's hands were shaking. Ronald, it's just how my mother talks sometimes. She doesn't mean, answer the question, did you know? The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Monica's eyes were filling with tears, but Ronald couldn't bring himself to care. All he could see was her smile on Friday night, the way she'd laughed along with her mother's Arabic jokes, the way she'd translated nothing, said nothing, defended nothing. I knew, Monica whispered finally. I knew what she was saying. But Ronald, I couldn't just, my mother was, Ronald felt something inside him break. Not dramatically, not with rage or shouting, just a quiet, cold breaking, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. You knew. You sat there and let her talk about my mother like that. You smiled while she did it. She's my mother. What was I supposed to do? Defend us! The shout came out of nowhere, surprising them both. You were supposed to defend the man you married and the woman who raised him. You were supposed to tell your mother to shut her damn mouth. Monica was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. You don't understand what it's like. My mother has opinions about everything, and if I disagree with her, She what? She'll cut you off? Stop buying you designer purses? Kick you out of the country club? Ronald's voice was bitter. Newsflash, Monica. We don't need any of that. I never needed any of that. But I needed you to have my back, and you didn't. Ronald, please. Does she do this often? Speak Arabic about me? About my mother? While we sit there like idiots not understanding? Monica couldn't meet his eyes. That was answer enough. How long? Ronald, how long has your mother been mocking us in Arabic while you smiled and said nothing? Since we got engaged. Monica's voice was barely audible. She didn't approve. She thought you were too poor. Too beneath you. I didn't think that. I don't think that. Monica reached for him, but Ronald stepped back. But you let her think it. You let her say it. For 4 years, you've been letting your mother insult the man you supposedly love. And you've been smiling and nodding along. I love you, Ronald, I do. But my mother, she's difficult, and I've always had to just what? Just let her walk all over people? Just let her treat my mother like garbage? Ronald grabbed his jacket. I need to leave. Where are you going? I don't know. Anywhere but here. Ronald, please, we can work this out. He turned at the door. Did you ever actually love me, Monica? Or was I just your rebellion? Your way of proving to Mommy that you weren't completely under her thumb? That's not fair. None of this is fair. Ronald yanked the door open. My mother spent 4 years being polite to your family, smiling through your mother's condescension, staying quiet while they mocked her poverty and my career choices. She did that because she thought you loved me. She thought our marriage was worth protecting. And all that time, you were betraying us both. Ronald! But he was already gone, taking the stairs 2 at a time, his vision blurred with rage and heartbreak. He got in his car and drove, not knowing where he was going, just knowing he couldn't be in that apartment with a woman who'd spent years lying to him through silence. His phone rang. Monica. He declined the call. It rang again, and again. He turned it off. Ronald found himself pulling into his mother's parking lot. The lights were still on in her apartment. He climbed the stairs on autopilot and knocked. Patricia opened the door, took one look at his face and pulled him inside. She knew, Ronald said. She knew everything. For 4 years. His mother just held him, the way she'd held him when he was 7 and his father died, when he was 12 and got bullied at school, when he was 18 and got his first heartbreak. She didn't say, I told you so. She didn't say anything. She just held her son while he fell apart. Later, when Ronald could breathe again, they sat at the kitchen table with cold coffee and the weight of betrayal between them. What do you want to do? Patricia asked quietly. Ronald looked at the files spread across his mother's apartment. Evidence of fraud, of deception, of a woman who thought she was untouchable. He thought about Monica's tears, her excuses, her 4 years of silence. He thought about Layla Hassan laughing in Arabic, confident that no one could understand her cruelty. They had no idea what Ronald and his mother were about to unleash, but they were going to learn. I want justice, Ronald said. Real justice, not revenge, justice. I want them to face consequences for once in their privileged lives. Can we do that? Patricia looked at her son, her baby boy who'd grown into a good man despite everything, who'd chosen teaching over money because he wanted to help people, who'd fallen in love with a woman who didn't deserve him. Yes, she said simply. Yes, we can. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in Ronald's situation. The next morning, Ronald woke up on his mother's couch with a stiff neck and a clear head. Patricia was already up, dressed in business casual, her old laptop open on the dining table surrounded by files and notes. Coffee's ready, she said without looking up, and I've made a plan. Ronald poured himself a cup and sat down across from her. His phone turned back on, showed 37 missed calls from Monica and 23 text messages ranging from apologetic to angry to desperate. He ignored them all. Tell me, Patricia pulled her reading glasses down her nose and looked at him seriously. First, I need to know you're sure about this. Once we start, there's no going back. Your marriage is probably over. Monica will side with her mother. Layla will use every resource she has to fight back. This could get ugly. It's already ugly, Mom. They made it ugly years ago. We're just finally responding. All right then. Patricia turned the laptop screen toward him. I've drafted 3 separate reports. One goes to the IRS regarding the unreported rental income. That's the easiest to prove and will trigger an audit. One goes to U.S. Customs and Border Protection about the import documentation fraud. And one goes to the Securities and Exchange Commission about the inflated revenue figures she's showing to potential buyers. Ronald whistled low. You're going nuclear. She called me pathetic. Patricia's voice was ice. She mocked the life I built for you while working 3 jobs and wearing secondhand clothes. She laughed at the woman who helped her dead husband build the empire she's been living off for a decade. Yes, Ronald, I'm going nuclear. What happens to her if all 3 agencies investigate? Patricia leaned back. Best case scenario for Layla? She pays massive fines. We're talking hundreds of thousands in IRS penalties, possibly over $2 million in customs fines, and SEC penalties that could run into the millions, depending on how serious they consider the investor fraud. She'll have to pay back taxes on all that unreported rental income plus penalties. The sale of her company falls through. Her business reputation is destroyed. And worst case? Federal charges, prison time for the customs fraud and investor fraud, seizure of assets, complete financial ruin. Patricia met her son's eyes. I know that sounds extreme, but these aren't small violations, Ronald. This is systematic, years-long fraud across multiple federal agencies. She's been stealing from the government and lying to investors. She thought she was too smart to get caught. Ronald sat with that for a moment. Part of him, the part that had been raised to be kind, to be forgiving, to turn the other cheek, flinched at the magnitude of what they were discussing. But another part, the part that had watched his mother work herself to exhaustion for 3 decades, that had endured 4 years of subtle insults and condescension, that had discovered his wife had been betraying him through silence. That part wanted to watch Layla Hassan's perfect world burn. Do it, he said. File all 3 reports. Patricia nodded once, decisive. I'll need a few days to finalize everything. These reports need to be airtight. If there's any holes in the evidence, Layla's lawyers will exploit them. I want every document cross-referenced, every claim backed up with multiple sources. Can I help? Actually, yes. I need you to do something that might be hard. Patricia pulled out a small digital recorder. I need you to have one more conversation with Monica. A real conversation where you ask her directly about what she knew, how long it's been going on, whether Layla ever said anything else about us. I need it recorded. Ronald felt sick. Why? Because if this goes to court, and it might, if Layla tries to fight the investigations, we need to establish that her pattern of behavior extends beyond business fraud. We need to show she's someone who operates with contempt for others, who thinks rules don't apply to her. Monica's testimony about the Arabic conversations, about her mother's attitude, could be valuable. And if Monica confirms what Layla said on tape, we can use it to establish character. She's not going to talk to me. She will. She's been calling you nonstop. She's desperate to fix this. Use that. Patricia's voice was gentle but firm. I know this feels like manipulation, Ronald, but this is war now. They fired the first shot 4 years ago. We just didn't know we were under attack. Ronald took the recorder. That afternoon, he finally responded to Monica's texts. We need to talk. Not at the apartment. Meet me at Millennium Park by the Bean. 4 p.m. Her response was immediate. I'll be there. Thank you. I love you. Ronald didn't respond to that. He arrived early, the digital recorder in his jacket pocket, already running. Late November in Chicago meant the park was mostly empty, tourists scared off by the cold wind coming off Lake Michigan. He stood in front of the Cloudgate sculpture, the Bean, and watched his distorted reflection in its silver surface. Monica arrived right at 4, bundled in a designer coat that probably cost more than Ronald made in a month. Her eyes were red from crying, her usual perfect makeup absent. She looked terrible, and Ronald couldn't bring himself to feel bad about it. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, her voice small. "I'm not here to reconcile, Monica. I'm here for answers." She flinched. "Okay, whatever you need. How long has your mother been speaking Arabic about us? And I want the truth, all of it." Monica hugged herself against the cold. "Since we got engaged, she started doing it at family dinners. Just little comments at first, about your clothes, your car, your job. Then it got worse. She'd talk about your mother too, about how it was embarrassing having her at family events, how she wished you'd come from a better family. And you never said anything. 4 years, Monica. I told myself it didn't matter what she said in Arabic because you didn't understand it, so it couldn't hurt you." Monica's voice cracked. "I know how that sounds. I know it was wrong. But my mother, if I stood up to her, she'd freeze me out. She'd make everything harder. She'd what? Stop bankrolling your lifestyle?" Ronald kept his voice neutral, clinical. The recorder was catching every word. "It's not just that. She controls everything. My trust fund, my inheritance, my connections in the industry. If I got on her bad side, she could ruin my career. She's done it to other people who crossed her. So you sacrificed me and my mother to keep mommy happy. I'm a coward, okay? I'm a fucking coward, and I hate myself for it." Monica was crying now. "But I do love you, Ronald. I really do. When we're alone, when it's just us, that's real. That's always been real. Was it real when you came home with designer bags she bought you? When you started talking about how I should make more money, get a better job, how our apartment wasn't good enough?" Ronald's voice was cold. "Or were those your mother's words coming out of your mouth?" Monica couldn't answer. "What else did she say, Monica? I want to know everything, every comment, every insult, everything she said in Arabic that you understood, and I didn't." And Monica told him. It poured out like a confession. 4 years of cruelty delivered in a language Ronald didn't speak. How Layla had told her sister that Ronald was charity work, Monica would grow tired of. How she'd laughed about Patricia's apple pie, calling it peasant food. How she'd discussed Ronald's salary at family gatherings, comparing it to what David made, and wondering aloud how Monica could settle for so little. How she'd told Monica's cousins that the Orkut family was exactly the kind of people we left Lebanon to escape from. Poor, struggling, content with mediocrity. Ronald listened to it all, the recorder capturing every word, and felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. This wasn't just mockery. This was systematic, calculated cruelty from a woman who'd built her entire identity on being better than others. "Why are you telling me all this now?" Ronald asked when she finally ran out of words. "Because I want to save our marriage. Because I'll do anything to fix this. I'll cut my mother off. You won't cut her off, Monica. You've had 4 years to do that, and you chose her every single time." Ronald pulled out his phone. "I'm filing for divorce. My lawyer will send the papers next week." "Ronald, no, please!" Monica grabbed his arm. "We can fix this. I'll go to therapy. There's nothing to fix. You showed me who you are. You're your mother's daughter. You just hide it. Better." He pulled away from her. "Don't contact me again. All communication goes through lawyers from now on." "You can't do this. I love you." Ronald turned back, and his voice was colder than the November wind. "Did you know your mother has been committing federal fraud for years?" Monica froze. "What?" "Import fraud, tax evasion, investor fraud. Your mother has been breaking federal laws, and she's about to get caught. So when you go crying to her about our divorce, you might want to mention that her perfect little empire is about to come crashing down. And when it does, every federal agency investigation will be public record. Every news outlet in Chicago will cover it. Everyone she's ever looked down on will watch her fall. You're bluffing." "Am I?" "Ask her about the shipping manifest from 2019. Ask her about the Scottsdale rental property. Ask her about the inflated revenue numbers she showed to TechCore acquisitions." Ronald watched Monica's face go white as she realized he wasn't bluffing at all. "Your mother thought she was untouchable. She was wrong." He walked away then, leaving Monica standing in front of the bean, her reflection as fractured and distorted as their marriage had always been. 3 days later, Patricia Orcutt hit send on 3 separate emails. one to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, one to U.S. Customs and Border Protection's Trade Enforcement Division, one to the SEC's Division of Enforcement. Each email was professionally formatted, meticulously documented, and devastating. Patricia had spent 72 hours cross-referencing every claim, attaching supporting documents, providing witness contact information, and laying out a timeline of violations that spanned nearly a decade. She'd included screenshots, shipping manifests, financial records, property documents, and rental income records. Everything was time-stamped, verified, and irrefutable. "It's done," she told Ronald over coffee in her apartment. "Now we wait." They didn't have to wait long. Federal investigations move slowly, but they move thoroughly. Within 2 weeks, IRS agents showed up at Layla Hassan's office with a warrant to examine her financial records. Within 3 weeks, customs enforcement officers were interviewing her shipping broker and seizing documentation. Within a month, the SEC had frozen the sale of Hassan International pending investigation into her financial disclosures. Ronald heard about it through the grapevine, teachers at his school who had connections in the business community, friends who'd seen news reports about a prominent Chicago import business under federal investigation. He didn't reach out to Monica, didn't check on how she was handling it. He'd moved back into his own apartment after she'd moved out to live with her mother, and he was filing for divorce on grounds of irreconcilable differences. Monica had tried to contact him dozens of times, but Ronald's lawyer had shut it down. There would be no reconciliation, no second chances. That bridge had burned to ash. 2 months after Patricia filed her reports, Ronald got a call from an FBI agent. "Mr. Orcutt, this is Special Agent Maria Torres with the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. We're working in conjunction with other agencies on the Hassan International investigation, and we'd like to speak with your mother, Patricia Orcutt. We understand she provided the initial documentation that sparked these investigations." Ronald passed the phone to his mother, who'd been expecting this call. "Yes, this is Patricia Orcutt," she said calmly. "I'd be happy to answer any questions." The interview took 3 hours. Patricia sat at her dining table with Ronald beside her and answered every question with calm precision. Yes, she'd worked for Hassan International for 15 years. Yes, she'd helped build many of the systems Layla had later abused. Yes, she'd maintained documentation as personal insurance after leaving the company. No, she hadn't hacked into anything. The company had simply never revoked her system access. Yes, she understood everything she was saying was being recorded and could be used in legal proceedings. When Agent Torres finally closed her notebook, she looked at Patricia with something like respect. "Ms. Orcutt, I have to say, this is one of the most thoroughly documented whistleblower cases I've ever seen. Most people come to us with suspicions. You came with proof." "I had 15 years of experience," Patricia said simply. "I know how these systems work. I know what evidence prosecutors need." "Can I ask why you waited so long to come forward?" Patricia glanced at Ronald. "Because it wasn't personal before. I believed in letting people live their lives, even if I didn't approve of their methods. But then Ms. Hassan made it personal. She went after my family. At that point, staying silent would have been enabling abuse." Agent Torres nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, you did the right thing. Companies like Hassan International get away with this kind of fraud for years because people are too afraid or too compliant to speak up. You weren't." After the agent left, Ronald looked at his mother. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," Patricia admitted, "but satisfied. They have everything they need now. The investigation is out of our hands. Do you think she'll go to prison?" "I think she'll probably take a plea deal, pay enormous fines, accept probation, lose her business license. But yes, I think there's a real chance of prison time for the customs fraud. That's a federal felony with mandatory minimums if they can prove intent." Patricia sighed. "Part of me feels bad about that, but a larger part remembers her laughing at my dress, calling me pathetic in a language she thought I couldn't understand, and I feel less bad. She earned this. Yes, she did." The resolution came faster than Ronald expected. 4 months after the investigations began, Layla Hassan was indicted on 11 federal charges, 6 counts of customs fraud, 3 counts of tax evasion, and 2 counts of securities fraud. The news hit the Chicago business community like a bomb. Ronald saw the headline on his phone while eating lunch in the teacher's lounge. Prominent Chicago businesswoman indicted in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. He read the article carefully. Layla's lawyer had issued a statement proclaiming her innocence. But the evidence was overwhelming. The Scottsdale property had been seized. Hassan International had been shut down pending resolution of the case. Estimated fines and restitution could exceed $4 million. If convicted on all counts, Layla faced up to 20 years in prison. There was a quote from an unnamed federal prosecutor. This case demonstrates that no one is above the law, regardless of their wealth or social status. Ms. Hassan believed she could commit fraud with impunity. She was wrong. Ronald forwarded the article to his mother without comment. She replied with a single emoji, a scales of justice symbol. 3 weeks later, Layla Hassan took a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to 4 counts of customs fraud and 2 counts of tax evasion in exchange for the securities fraud charges being dropped. Her sentence, 30 months in federal prison, 5 years of probation upon release, and $3.2 million in fines and restitution. Her business was dissolved, her assets were liquidated to pay the fines, and her business license was permanently revoked. The woman who'd mocked Patricia Orcutt for being poor would be leaving prison with nothing. No business, no reputation, no wealth. She'd be starting over at 60 years old, a convicted felon, with her name permanently attached to one of Chicago's most publicized fraud cases. Ronald met his mother for coffee at a diner in Bridgeport on the day Layla's sentencing was announced. "How do you feel?" he asked. Patricia stirred her coffee slowly. "Honestly, conflicted. I'm relieved that she's facing consequences. I'm satisfied that the law worked the way it's supposed to work. But I don't feel joyful about it, Ronald. I don't feel victorious. I just feel tired." "You think we went too far?" "No. I think we went exactly as far as we needed to go. She committed serious crimes and she's facing serious consequences. That's justice, not revenge." Patricia looked at her son. "But justice doesn't feel as satisfying as people think it will. It's not a fireworks show. It's just closure." "Monica tried to call me yesterday," Ronald said quietly. I didn't answer. "How's the divorce going?" "Almost final. She's not fighting it anymore. I think she's too busy dealing with her mother's situation." Ronald took a drink of his coffee. "She sent me an email, said she was sorry, that she understood why I did what I did, that she wished things had been different." "Do you wish things had been different?" Ronald considered that. "I wish I'd married a woman with a spine, someone who would have stood up to her mother, defended us, chosen our relationship over her family's money. But Monica wasn't that person, and probably never could be. So no, I don't wish things had been different. I wish I'd seen who she really was sooner." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching traffic pass on the street outside. Finally, Patricia spoke. "I need to tell you something, Ronald, about why I really did this." "Okay." "It wasn't just about the insults at dinner. It was about you." Patricia's voice was soft but intense. "For 4 years, I watched them make you smaller. Watched you start questioning whether teaching was enough, whether you were successful enough, whether you deserved Monica. You started measuring yourself by their standards. Money, status, appearances. You were losing yourself trying to fit into their world. And I couldn't watch that anymore." Ronald felt tears sting his eyes. "I raised you to be kind, to work hard, to help people, to find meaning in what you do. And you became exactly that, a teacher who changes students' lives, who makes a difference every day. That's success, Ronald. That's real success." And Layla Hassan, with all her money and her business and her designer clothes, never understood that. She never understood that the poor, pathetic woman she mocked had raised a son worth 10 of her daughter. "Mom, let me finish. I didn't bring her down for me. I brought her down for you. Because you deserved to be free of people who made you feel like you weren't enough. Because you deserved a fresh start with someone who would value you properly. Because my son is worth more than they ever gave him credit for." Ronald reached across the table and took his mother's hand. They sat like that for a long moment. Two people who'd been through hell together and come out the other side scarred but stronger. Later that evening, Ronald sat in his apartment now, not his and Monica's, and thought about lessons learned, about pride and humility, about the danger of judging others by their circumstances rather than their character, about how the quietest people sometimes have the sharpest teeth. He thought about Layla Hassan, who'd spent her life believing that wealth and status made her superior to others, learning in a federal courtroom that she was subject to the same laws as everyone else. He thought about Monica, who'd chosen comfort over courage and was now living with the consequences. He thought about his mother, who'd worked 3 jobs and worn second-hand clothes and raised a son who chose teaching over money because she'd taught him that meaning mattered more than status. The lesson, Ronald realized, wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even really about justice, though justice had certainly been served. The lesson was simpler than that. Never underestimate the person you're insulting. You never know what they understand, what they know, or what they're capable of doing when you finally push them too far. Layla Hassan had looked at Patricia Orcutt and seen a poor, uneducated woman who was beneath her notice. She'd mocked her in Arabic, confident in her superiority, certain that someone like Patricia could never touch someone like her. She'd been wrong, and that mistake had cost her everything. If you enjoyed this story, like this video, and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.